2,600 years ago, a handful of Greek sailors stood on a rocky cliff, staring across a narrow strip of water that separated two continents. They had no idea that this exact piece of land would become the most desired city on Earth. Empires would rise and fall trying to hold it. Armies would bleed for it. Kings would weep at its gates. Today, 16 million people call this place home. But before the grand mosques, before the towering minarets, before the bridges stretching across two continents, this was nothing more than a windswept hill above the sea. This is the entire history of Istanbul. Around 660 BC, a Greek colonist named Bezos sailed from the city of Megara with a dream and a prophecy. The Oracle of Delphi had told him to settle opposite the land of the blind. When Bezos reached the Bosphorus, he saw a settlement on the Asian shore, Chalcedon. Then he looked across the water. A peninsula jutted out between a natural harbor and the open sea, surrounded by deep currents full of fish. The people of Chalcedon had ignored this perfect spot. They were the blind ones. Bezos claimed the land. He called it Byzantium. Small stone houses climbed the hillside. Fishermen dragged nets heavy with tuna from the rushing strait. Merchant ships arrived from the Black Sea carrying grain, honey, and furs. Anchoring in the curved inlet the Greeks would call the Golden Horn. It was not yet a great city, but everything was about to change. By the 5th century BC, the Persian Empire turned its gaze westward. Soldiers in bronze armor marched across Anatolia. Byzantium fell under Persian control, a small but strategic outpost on the edge of a vast empire. Greek warships clashed with Persian fleets in the waters nearby, and the little settlement changed hands again and again. Greek, Persian, Spartan, Athenian, each power recognizing that whoever held this strait controlled the flow of trade between two seas and two continents. Wooden docks stretched further into the harbor. Warehouses filled with amphorae of olive oil and sacks of wheat lined the waterfront. Soldiers patrolled limestone walls that grew taller with every generation. Byzantium was no longer just a colony. It was becoming a prize. In 196 AD, the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus laid siege to Byzantium. The city resisted for 3 brutal years before its walls finally crumbled. Severus burned it to the ground. But even as smoke rose from the ruins, he understood this location was too valuable to abandon. He rebuilt the city larger than before, a hippodrome for chariot racing, new walls, colonnaded streets of polished stone. Roman engineers reshaped the landscape. Aqueducts carried water from distant hills into marble fountains. For over a century, the rebuilt city hummed with Roman order. Legionnaires marched through its gates. Merchants haggled in Latin and Greek beneath cloth awnings. But the Roman Empire was tearing itself apart from within. Civil wars erupted. Emperors rose and fell like waves. The empire needed a new center of power, and one man was about to make the most consequential decision in urban history. In 330 AD, Emperor Constantine the Great stood on the hills above the Bosphorus and declared this city the new capital of the Roman Empire. He called it Nova Roma, New Rome, but the world would call it Constantinople. Nothing would ever be the same. An explosion of construction transformed the peninsula. Tens of thousands of workers hauled marble from quarries across the Mediterranean. A massive forum took shape, crowned by a towering column with a golden statue of Constantine gazing over his creation. The hippodrome expanded to seat 80,000 screaming spectators. Churches rose with gilded domes that caught the morning sun. A vast network of underground cisterns was carved beneath the streets, their vaulted ceilings supported by hundreds of columns, holding enough water to sustain the city through any siege. Constantinople grew at breathtaking speed. Within decades, its population surpassed 500,000. It was the largest city in the Western world. Silk merchants from China, spice traders from India, fur dealers from the frozen north, all converged on the Golden Horn. The city became a crossroads of civilizations, a place where East met West in a swirl of languages, religions, and gold. In 532 AD, the city nearly destroyed itself. The Nika riots erupted in the hippodrome. Mobs set fire to churches, government buildings, and entire neighborhoods. Half of Constantinople burned. Emperor Justinian almost fled, but he stayed, and from the ashes, something extraordinary emerged. Justinian ordered the construction of a building that would defy belief. In just 5 years, 10,000 workers raised the Hagia Sophia, A cathedral with a dome so vast that visitors wept upon entering, convinced the ceiling was suspended from heaven by a golden chain. Light poured through 40 windows at the dome's base, making the interior glow as if lit from within. It was the largest enclosed space on Earth, and it would remain so for nearly 1,000 years. The city rebuilt itself grander than before. Mosaic artists pressed millions of tiny gold and glass tiles into church walls, creating shimmering images of saints and emperors. Scholars preserved the writings of ancient Greece and Rome in vast libraries. Constantinople became the guardian of Western knowledge while Europe descended into its dark ages. Century after century, enemies hurled themselves at Constantinople's legendary walls. Arab armies besieged the city twice and were repelled by a terrifying secret weapon, Greek fire, a mysterious liquid flame that burned even on water, turning enemy ships into floating infernos. The Theodosian walls, triple-layered fortifications stretching 4 miles across the peninsula, held firm against every assault for over 800 years. But in 1204, the unthinkable happened. The Fourth Crusade, originally bound for the Holy Land, turned instead on Constantinople. Christian soldiers sacked a Christian city. Knights on horseback rode through the Hagia Sophia. They looted gold, smashed relics, and stripped the city of treasures accumulated over 9 centuries. Constantinople survived, but it never fully recovered. By 1453, the Byzantine Empire had shrunk to little more than Constantinople itself, a fading jewel surrounded by the rising Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II, just 21 years old, assembled the largest cannon ever built. It was 27 feet long and required 60 oxen to drag into position. On April 6th, the bombardment began. For 53 days, cannonballs slammed into walls that had stood for 1,000 years. Inside the city, church bells rang day and night. Women and old men carried stones to repair the crumbling defenses. Emperor Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor, fought alongside his soldiers. On May 29th, Ottoman troops poured through a breach in the walls. The emperor charged into the advancing army and was never seen again. Mehmed rode his horse through the shattered gates and into the Hagia Sophia. He touched his forehead to the ground in prayer. Constantinople, the city that had defied the world for 1,100 years, had fallen. The medieval world was over. Mehmed, now called the Conqueror, renamed the city Istanbul and made it the crown of the Ottoman Empire. He invited Muslims, Christians, and Jews to settle, transforming Istanbul into the most cosmopolitan city on earth. The Grand Bazaar rose from the ground, a labyrinth of over 4,000 shops beneath vaulted stone ceilings, where merchants traded silk, ceramics, jewels, and spices from 3 continents. Sultans competed to leave their mark on the skyline. In the 16th century, the genius architect Sinan designed over 300 structures across the empire. His masterpiece, the Süleymaniye Mosque, crowned the city's highest hill, a cascade of domes and minarets visible from every direction, its interior flooded with light from 200 stained glass windows. Beneath the mosque, soup kitchens fed thousands of the city's poor every day. The Topkapi Palace sprawled across the tip of the peninsula, a city within a city. Gilded chambers, secret gardens, a harem of 400 rooms, and treasury vaults filled with emeralds the size of fists. Istanbul's population climbed past 700,000. It was once again the largest city in Europe. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European powers surged ahead with industry and technology, while the Ottoman Empire stagnated. Steam-powered warships appeared in the Bosphorus. Telegraph wires stretched across the city. In 1883, the Orient Express connected Istanbul to Paris by rail. Luxury carriages carrying diplomats and spies rolled into Sirkeci Station, a grand building where East literally met West. The empire crumbled through world wars and revolutions. When the dust settled, a military commander named Mustafa Kemal Ataturk forged a new nation, the Republic of Turkey, in 1923. The capital moved to Ankara. Istanbul, for the first time in 16 centuries, was no longer a capital city. Many believed the city's greatest days were over. They were wrong. In the second half of the 20th century, Istanbul erupted with growth. Migrants poured in from across Anatolia. The population doubled, then tripled, then kept climbing. In 1973, the first Bosphorus Bridge opened. a steel ribbon connecting Europe and Asia, lit up at night like a strand of fire suspended over black water. A second bridge followed, then a third, then an undersea tunnel, the Marmaray, carrying trains beneath the strait that had defined the city for millennia. Glass skyscrapers rose in the business districts while ancient minarets still punctured the horizon. Street vendors sold roasted chestnuts on the same cobblestones where Roman chariots once raced. Fishermen cast lines from the Galata Bridge as cargo ships from 40 nations passed beneath them. The Grand Bazaar still thrummed with haggling voices, just as it had 500 years before. Today, Istanbul is a megacity of 16 million, straddling 2 continents, carrying the DNA of Greek colonists, Roman emperors, Byzantine scholars, Ottoman sultans, and modern dreamers. Every stone holds a story. Every street corner whispers of an empire. From a windswept hill above the Bosphorus to one of the greatest cities civilization has ever produced. Istanbul did not just witness history, it shaped it. It survived sieges, earthquakes, fires, conquests, and revolutions. It has been destroyed and reborn more times than any city on earth. And perhaps, the greatest chapter of Istanbul is still being written.